She was the villain. And with her on the way to being queen consort, there was going to be people or bodies left in the street because of that.
So something a little bit unexpected took place this past week. Lady Lansdowne, Camilla's close friend and confidant, and part of what we traditionally call her ladies-in-waiting, has spoken out about the queen consort and, amongst other things, has talked about how Camilla's feelings were hurt, surprise, surprise, by Harry's comments about her in Spare and in the interviews that he's conducted ever since. Oh, and before I forget, on the news of the Sussexes being included in the Coronation booklet, fear not, I'm saving that topic for next week's podcast because Zach's on again and I know how you all love to hear his take on things, so I thought I'd hold on to that until then, so please stay tuned for next Monday. Back to today's topic. Now, admittedly, I'm not very well versed when it comes to Queen Camilla. I don't really know much about her. A lot of what happened with her and Charles and Diana took place way before my time. And by the time they got married, I was a little girl. And I think by then her image had been at least a little bit rehabilitated. But I will say, and I should have prepped for this before, but if you can see right here, yesterday, I made a purchase. So it's a book by Angela Levin, one of, my favorite people to listen to when it comes to all this royal commentary. She wrote Harry's biography back in 2018, and I find her to be a credible source. So I'm very excited to go through this. It's not a very big book. I think I'll demolish it over the weekend, and hopefully maybe right after the coronation we can do a really good deep dive into Camilla and her journey from, as it says on the cover here, outcast to queen consort. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's put you back here next to your little stepson's book. So, until I read this book, don't know much about her. But what I have learned and heard in the past few years since I've really grown an interest in the royal family is that she is a very tough woman. She takes it on the chin repeatedly and is not one to complain, at least not publicly. And considering she was once one of the most reviled women in England, or potentially on the planet, because Diana was loved worldwide, that's saying something. And it really paints her out as the exact antithesis to what Meghan Markle is, a self-proclaimed victim who, despite having everything in the world, which once included the love of the people, found nothing better to do than complain and complain and complain. Because when you consider what Camilla went through, and honestly what Catherine, Princess of Wales, went through as well, but I do want to kind of focus this video on Meghan and Camilla because of the villain comment. Whether you think it's justified or not, whether you're a very big fan of Diana's and you think Camilla is a demon summoned from hell, what she went through was quite harrowing, to say the least. And she didn't have the protections that Meghan had because Meghan, fast-tracked her entry into the royal family, so much so that red flags were popping up everywhere. But Camilla had to wait for decades upon decades until she finally married her husband and was therefore afforded all the security and protections that come with a royal position. And that's not to say that Prince Charles at the time didn't personally provide her with security. But it wasn't taxpayer funded as far as I'm aware. I mean, I think there would have been riots in the streets if people at the time thought that they were funding Camilla's security. So she effectively had to go through that alone, which is confirmed by her close confidant, Lady Lansdowne. And let's not pretend for 1 second that Lady Lansdowne just decided on a whim to speak to the press about how Camilla felt about Harry's comments in his book without consulting the king and queen themselves first. I think we all know by now that when someone in that social circle, a lady in waiting, speaks out, it is with the blessing of the palace. Lady Lansdowne's interview was published after the palace announced Harry's attendance. To me, that speaks volumes that King Charles would even allow that to happen so close to the coronation, which he now knows his son is attending. Because what this has done is rev up all of the uproar over Harry's comments from a few months ago and thereby putting Harry right in the crosshairs once again. And that's exactly where Meghan Markle seemingly wants her husband to be. This video is actually a sequel to a video I made, I believe back in November, last November, called The Black Widow. Now, if you haven't watched it, I do recommend that you do. I'm probably gonna pop it up here somewhere on the screen because it sets the scene of Meghan's journey, from bottom to the top, and the men in particular that she used and discarded along that path. For years now, astute observers have commented on how they believe that the same fate that the other men in her life were met with, like her first husband and her father, also awaits Prince Harry. Meaning one day, he will outgrow his usefulness to Meghan, and he may be discarded. And I'll be the first to tell you, I'm no relationship expert, okay? And I have no idea what goes on behind closed doors. I mean, for all I know, they may actually have a very loving and healthy relationship. I mean, I can't even say that with a straight face, honestly, because what we see on camera speaks volumes, let alone what we don't see. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. But regardless of the status of their personal relationship, I think we can say one thing for certain. Ever since 2021, maybe mid-2021, after the explosive Oprah interview, basically, we've all noticed how Meghan and Harry have gone from being one unit, as they were throughout their time in the royal family, and even throughout 2020. They made most of their appearances together, to moving along down different paths publicly. And I remember there being talk about this potentially being deliberate, with Meghan thrusting herself into the political sphere and even more down the entertainment route with her podcast and now potentially the relaunch of the TIG, while Prince Harry has gone down the route of, self-destruction. Because notice how Meghan only shows her face with Harry. She only attaches herself to Harry in events that she believes would boost her own profile and make her look good. So, namely charitable events. We see her, of course, receiving awards alongside her husband for standing up to the racism that even they admitted now didn't happen. And of course, we've got the Invictus Games, which I've noticed since 2018, she has just taken over. She's got to be right there on stage, solo, making speeches. And all I can think is, what do you have to do with the Invictus Games? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that a woman shouldn't be supporting her husband, especially considering the fact that the Invictus Games is Harry's baby. But there's a difference between supporting your spouse, showing up with them, sitting next to them, but she's gone way beyond that. I mean, she even wormed her way into an ad campaign to promote the Invictus Games, with the camera zooming in on her face like that. It's like, come on, what does that have to do with you? The answer is, of course, it boosts her profile, or at least she thinks it does. Because as soon as a project is showing signs of maybe not doing so well, or there's some negative backlash, or it's an absolute catastrophe, like how Spare was received, she's nowhere to be seen. Harry's out on his own. And yes, you can argue, well, it's Harry's memoir, so what does it have to do with Meghan? I would ask you the same question about the Invictus Games. If she's gonna claim I'm the supportive wife and I wanna show up for my husband, why not show up for him when everyone was bashing him for his pathetic excuse for a memoir? And it's not like they didn't expect the negative reception of that book, because it was published at the height of the criticism that they received over their Netflix reality show. So they knew that whatever they'd said in the reality show didn't go down so well. So if anything, her husband needed support more than ever, fragile human being that he is, with his own admitted mental issues. And come to think of it, Meghan actually has a lot more to do with Spare than she ever did the Invictus Games, because she basically features in a third of that book. So based on that alone, it would have made a lot more sense for her to show up with her husband and support him. I'm not saying sit down next to him in every single interview and every single talk show, but show your face. Be the supportive wife you claim you are. It would make more sense to see her alongside him there than prancing around on stage, making speeches at the Invictus Games. You know what, in fact, who wants to bet, and I'm not a betting woman, so not serious here, but who wants to bet that had the book Spare, or been a critical success, had it been received positively with raving reviews, she would have been by Harry's side, or perhaps even pushing him off stage and taking that microphone faster than you can say Quidditch. Now, we all know the opposite to be true. The book was a disaster, not financially, it made them millions, which I suppose was their goal all along, but critically, it was a flop. As was their show, and as is everything they now attach their names to, which is why we haven't been seeing Meghan. Now, we're seeing this same behavior playing out at the coronation. And I don't know about you, but I don't believe for 1 second that Harry decided to go against Meghan's wishes. I don't know how else to put it. I don't know what euphemism there is for me to use, but he's her lapdog, okay? There, I said it. It's not nice, but it's true. Her wish is his command. And if she didn't want him showing up in support of his, supposedly, according to him, lying and self-serving and treacherous father, alongside his villainous and dangerous evil stepmother, to watch them get crowned as monarchs of the Empire 2.0, then he wouldn't be going. If for 1 second she had conveyed to him that this would be a betrayal of everything she stands for, everything they fought for, over the past 4 years, the racism, the sexism, then he wouldn't be going. And while I'm here, if he for 1 second believed that his accusations against his own family were remotely true, then I would surmise personally that he wouldn't be going. Which begs the question, why is he going? Because after all that booing and being put in their place so publicly at last year's Platinum Jubilee, I would have thought that neither of them would have wanted to come because of that negative experience. An experience that Meghan's own close friends, because yes, People magazine is at it again, have stated now publicly that the real reason behind why Meghan doesn't want to go is not her child's 4th birthday. I mean, what a shocker, right? But because she didn't want to be exposed to the scrutiny of the people. As much as she wanted to support her dear father-in-law, of course. They had to throw that one in there. That's another way of saying she doesn't want to get booed. She doesn't want to sit in aisle 54 with the candlestick in front of her face. She doesn't want to have to curtsy to those better than her. And that's why she's not going, as we already discussed in the last video. But why is she so willing to let her husband go through all of that scrutiny, that booing, that negativity, all by himself? What happened to the supporting wife? And I'm not changing my tune here. You know from the last video, I couldn't care less why she's not coming. I'm just happy she's not. But it is an interesting response to the people who say she's not controlling, she doesn't want the limelight, she's only on that Invictus Game stage because she's supporting her husband. Her husband who is nowhere to be seen near her on that stage. If she were really the type to support her husband, then wouldn't you think she would want to be there supporting him at his time of need, when he's going to be supposedly vulnerable, cast out, as he should be? I mean, I don't believe he should be there, but what's done is done. But wouldn't that be the best time to support your husband, rather than when he's pretty much on cloud 9 at the Invictus Games, when arguably he needs the least support? And as for Harry, why would he willingly want to go there after lambasting his family and accusing them of pretty vicious things? Lying, backstabbing, leaking, keeping information and evidence from him, running him and his wife out of the UK? And as much as he wants to backtrack away from it now, racism, which he accepted an award for not a few months ago, those aren't minor accusations. I remember when he was being interviewed by Tom Bradby that he said, "I need an apology, a public apology, accountability." And he made it out like he would only show up and support his father if he received all of those things, which he clearly did not, because we ain't seeing it and Meghan's not going. In those interviews, he seemed so convinced and so hell-bent on not supporting his family and painting them out to be the villains So his sudden decision to show up and support these supposed villains is entirely out of place and downright hypocritical. And it's funny because her friends have told the press that that's another reason why Meghan doesn't want to go, because she thought it would look hypocritical, or to quote her word salad, inauthentic. So let me get this straight. You don't want to look inauthentic, but it's okay for your husband to be seen like that? I mean, is she even trying to pretend anymore that she's not thrusting him into the crosshairs? Since the past few months, we can see that the supporting wife act is finished. Because if it weren't, half of the things that made it to the book wouldn't have been there. Including, of course, chiefly, his drug use and glamorization of that drug use, which continued in an online monetized therapy session with Dr. Gabor Mate, which I've also covered previously on this channel. What supporting wife in her right mind would allow her husband to go out there and promote what he promotes in the way that he does on such a global platform? This woman who pretends to be a humanitarian, who cares about the children and the future, it's the epitome of performative activism. And while I acknowledge Harry is an adult who is responsible for his own decisions and what he says, I'm not taking that away from him. But as I said earlier, from where I'm sitting, because things could be different behind closed doors, he acts like he's her puppet. And if Meghan doesn't want him to do something, he won't do it. That's why he dropped one of his favorite pastimes, hunting with his friends. Speaking of his friends, that's why he dropped most of his friends. Because Meghan didn't like them. She didn't want them. And that's why he dropped his own family, his monarchy, and his country. Because Meghan wanted him to. If you're gonna deny that, then, well, think about it. Why were every single one of those relationships fully intact, as far as we know, especially his friends? Things may have been fractured with his family, sure. But everything was going on fine as things can be, until Meghan Markle came along. So you tell us, Harry, who's the real villain here? Your stepmother, who put her head down and did the work and waited until the vitriol passed and emerged on the other side, and who supported her husband through thick and thin, something which I wish I could say your wife is doing to you? Or is it the person who you share a bed with? I don't envy Harry one bit. He now has to come face to face with his villainous and dangerous stepmother, where he will watch from the sidelines as she, alongside her husband, gets crowned as Queen of England. And he'll sit there, possibly lamenting the loss of all the grandeur that he was born into and could have been a part of, but through his own actions and through following the actions of his villainous wife, that's never gonna happen. It's really interesting and eye-opening to watch the trajectory of two opposite personalities, Meghan and Camilla, and how far apart their behavior and their attitude has taken them. In opposite trajectories, in fact, because we've got, on the one hand, Camilla, who started off being, as I said, the most hated woman in England. And that persisted for decades, to the point where the British monarchy had to assure the public that she would never be queen, that she would only be princess consort. Now, of course, we all know that the queen herself, may she rest in peace, announced that it was her wish that Camilla be queen consort. But in essence, this woman put her head down. She soldiered on, did the work, supported her husband, and is now getting crowned as the Queen of England. And on the other hand, we have a woman who, in terms of popularity and global adulation, was leagues beyond Camilla could have ever dreamed, because Meghan was on top of the world in 2017 when that engagement was announced, and all the way through her wedding, only to single-handedly destroy everything, all that goodwill, because she, to me, is the real villain in this story. Make no mistake, it's got nothing to do with her race. Everyone loved her, including the family. She wouldn't have been welcomed with such open arms if it had anything to do with her skin color. And as far as I'm concerned, her skin didn't magically change color and darken after she was married, because that's when things started going downhill. She got comfortable, she got the prince in the bag, and off came the mask. No one likes a liar, no one likes a victim, and no one likes a villain. I mean, they're pretty cool sometimes in movies and in books and stuff, but only when they have a really good story arc, you know, like Professor Snape. We all thought he was a villain forever, and then he turned out to be a hero. That was pretty interesting. So some villains are cool, but not Meghan Markle.